The private plane moved smoothly above the clouds, cutting through the sky as if nothing in the world could stop it. Inside, a man sat alone by the window. He was used to flying like this. Private planes, business meetings in distant cities. Fast decisions worth millions. This had been his normal life for many years. People knew him as a powerful billionaire, a man who controlled companies, land, and futures with a single signature. He looked calm, but his mind was busy. The trip was supposed to be short. He was going to see a remote area where a new project was planned. His team had shown him pictures and reports, but he believed in seeing things with his own eyes. That belief had made him successful. It had also made him stubborn. Outside the window, the land below slowly changed. Cities disappeared. Roads became thin lines. Green forests stretched far and wide. The jungle looked endless, wild, and quiet. He barely noticed it. To him, it was just land on a map. The pilot's voice came softly through the speaker, saying everything was fine. The engines hummed steadily. The man leaned back, closed his eyes for a moment, and thought about his schedule. Meetings, calls, plans. His life was full, but empty in ways he never had time to think about. Then, without warning, the plane shook. At first, it felt like light turbulence. He opened his eyes and looked around. The shaking grew stronger. The sound of the engines changed, turning rough and uneven. A sharp fear cut through the calm air of the cabin. The pilot's voice returned, this time tense. There was a problem. Something had gone wrong. The plane dropped suddenly. The man grabbed the armrest, his heart pounding. Papers flew from the small table. The shaking became violent. The sky outside no longer looked peaceful. Clouds rushed past the window as the plane struggled to stay up. He had faced many risks in his life, financial risks, legal risks, business wars, but this was different. There was no deal to negotiate with gravity. No money could fix what was happening now. The plane began to lose control. The last thing he remembered was a loud crash, a blinding pain, and the feeling of falling into darkness. When he opened his eyes again, everything was silent. For a moment, he thought he was dead. His head hurt badly. His body felt heavy, broken. The air smelled strange burnt metal mixed with wet earth. Slowly, sounds came back. Birds, wind, leaves moving. He tried to move, but pain shot through his side. He groaned softly. Around him were broken pieces of the plane, torn apart and scattered. Trees stood close, their branches snapped and burned. The jungle surrounded the crash site like a wall. He was alive. Barely he lay there for a long time, not knowing how much time had passed. Hours, maybe a full day. Hunger and thirst began to wake him fully. His throat felt dry, his lips cracked. When he finally forced himself to sit up, the world spun. No phone signal. His watch was cracked. His expensive clothes were torn and dirty. Blood had dried on his arm. For the first time in his adult life, he was completely alone. He called out for help, his voice weak. No answer. Only the jungle replied, loud and alive. Insects buzzed. Birds cried. Somewhere far away, something large moved through the trees. Fear slowly replaced shock. He dragged himself away from the wreckage, afraid it might catch fire again. Each step hurt. He had never known this kind of pain. In his world, pain was something other people handled for him. As night came, the jungle changed. Sounds grew louder, closer. The air became cold and damp. He found a tree and leaned against it, too weak to move anymore. Hunger twisted his stomach. Thirst burned his throat. His mind kept racing, trying to hold on to control. He told himself rescue would come soon. People would be looking for him. They always did, but the hours passed. The next day came with bright sunlight and heat. He woke up confused, his body stiff and aching. His mouth tasted bitter. He tried to stand and almost fell. He walked without direction, pushing through thick plants and sharp leaves. The jungle did not welcome him. Every step felt like a fight. Sweat soaked his clothes. His breathing grew heavy. At some point he fell. He did not know where he was anymore. The sky above was hidden by trees. His strength was gone. His thoughts became slow, foggy. Memories of his old life flashed in his mind: glass buildings, clean rooms, people waiting for his words. None of that mattered here. As the sun lowered again, his vision blurred. He crawled forward, not knowing why, just moving because stopping felt like death. His body finally gave up near a small clearing. That was where he collapsed, far from the crash. Not far from the edge of the jungle, a poor young girl was walking with a small basket. She lived close to the forest and knew its paths well. Life had taught her to be careful, but also brave. She had grown up with little, and she had learned how to survive. She noticed something strange near the trees, a shape that did not belong. At first, she thought it was an animal. Then she saw torn clothes. A human hand. She froze. Strangers were rare here. Dangerous ones even more so. Her heart beat fast as she slowly stepped closer. The man lying there looked broken, weak, and barely breathing. She had every reason to turn away, but she didn't. She knelt beside him, checking if he was alive. His skin was hot, his breathing shallow. He looked nothing like the powerful man he once was. He looked like someone who needed help. The jungle watched quietly as she made a choice that would change both of their lives forever. The girl worked quickly, moving with a careful balance of urgency and caution. She knew the jungle could be unforgiving, and the man lying before her seemed fragile, as if one wrong move could make him worse. She studied him for a moment, noticing the dirt and cuts covering his body, his clothes shredded. She could see that he had survived something terrible, but barely. She gently tried to lift his head to help him breathe easier. His eyes fluttered open, full of confusion and fear. He looked around, unable to recognize where he was. His world, once filled with luxury and control, was now trees, wild sounds, and the quiet pulse of life far from any city. He attempted to speak, but only a weak groan came out. His voice, usually commanding, was barely there. "Don't try to move," she whispered softly, careful not to frighten him. "I will help you. You are safe for now." He looked at her, startled by the presence of someone so small and fragile who seemed so sure and capable. His pride, which had always been a part of him, fought to stay awake. He wanted to sit up, to command, to be strong, but pain and exhaustion held him down. He realized he had no choice but to trust this stranger. The girl scanned the surroundings, noting a small patch nearby where the ground was drier. Carefully, she guided him toward it, half carrying, half supporting his weight. The movement was slow, difficult. Every step was a test of her strength and determination. The jungle seemed to close around them, thick and unwelcoming. Yet she moved as if it were familiar territory, her movements fluid and instinctive. Once they reached a slightly safer spot, she began tending to his injuries. She had little to work with: some clean water from a nearby stream, leaves to use as bandages, and her hands, but she worked with focus. Cleaning the wounds was painful for him, but he did not complain. He was unused to this kind of human touch. It's care without expectation. Hours passed in this way, the sun moving slowly across the sky. She talked gently to him, asking simple questions to keep him conscious, though she did not expect answers. The sound of her voice, soft and calm, seemed to anchor him. He had not realized how much he needed that human presence until now. The girl had her own story, though she did not share it yet. She had grown up in hardship, learning to survive on her own. She knew how to find food, how to build a fire, how to move quietly through the forest. Her life had been tough, but it had made her strong. Now, she was using that strength not for herself, but to help someone else. As evening approached, she gathered some dry leaves and small branches to make a temporary shelter. The man watched her, amazed. In his world, survival meant hiring people, buying the best tools, or finding shortcuts. Here, he saw a young girl create safety from nothing, her hands skilled and sure. He felt a strange mix of humility and admiration, though he did not say it aloud. Night came slowly. The jungle was alive with noises, calls of unseen animals, rustling leaves, the hum of insects. The girl kept a small fire burning, just enough to provide warmth and light. She made him drink some water, encouraging him to eat a few small pieces of dried fruit she had carried. He obeyed, his body too weak to resist, his mind slowly beginning to process that survival required humility, patience, and trust. They stayed close together that night. He wanted to ask questions, but words felt useless. He was learning to observe, to feel, to listen. The jungle was a teacher, harsh and relentless, but also patient for those willing to pay attention. Over the next few days, the girl continued her care. She taught him simple things: how to drink safely from the stream, how to move without hurting himself further, how to recognize which plants were safe to eat. He struggled at first, clumsy and slow, frustrated by his own weakness. But she never mocked or scolded him. Instead, she encouraged, guided, and waited. He began to realize how little he knew about life outside his world of money and comfort. Here the rules were different. Power and wealth were meaningless. Strength, courage, and understanding mattered. And he was learning, slowly, painfully, humbly. One morning, while he tried to walk further than before, he stumbled into a hidden path that led deeper into the jungle. He wanted to explore, to find something familiar, but she stopped him gently. "You need to rest," she said. "The jungle does not forgive haste." He wanted to argue, to insist he could handle more, but he saw the truth in her eyes. He had spent a lifetime controlling everything, but here, control was an illusion. Survival depended on patience, on listening, on being guided. For the first time, he felt the weight of dependence, the vulnerability of being cared for without status, without expectation. The days turned into a rhythm. The girl's presence became a steadying force, and he began to rely on her more than he would have admitted. She shared little about herself, but her actions spoke volumes, her courage, her resilience. He started to understand that intelligence and resourcefulness could exist without wealth or education, that strength could be quiet, unseen, but still undeniable. One afternoon, as they rested near a stream, he asked his first question. "Why? Why help me?" She looked at him, her eyes calm. "Because you are alive," she said simply, "and because someone needed to. That is enough reason." Felt a strange warmth, a mix of gratitude and confusion. In his world, help came with conditions. Here it was pure. No contracts, no negotiations, no expectation of return. Just care. That night, the sounds of the jungle seemed closer, sharper. He lay awake, listening. The girl slept nearby, quiet and steady. He thought about the life he had lost in the crash, luxury, power, comfort, and he realized that those things no longer seemed important. What mattered now was survival, connection, trust. Over the next week, he grew stronger. Slowly, painfully, he regained some of his mobility. He still depended on the girl for guidance, for food, for shelter. But he began to understand the rhythm of the jungle. He learned to move with care, to listen to the signs of animals, to read the weather from the clouds and the wind. Each day was a lesson, each moment a test. Through it all, he could not stop thinking about the girl. Her strength, her courage, her unshakable calm fascinated him. In the city, he had met countless people, but none like her. She existed entirely in the present, aware, grounded, powerful in ways he had never experienced. He respected her, trusted her, and began to care for her in ways he did not yet understand. One morning, they discovered a small clearing with edible plants and a fresh water source. The girl smiled, pleased with the find. He watched her, noting how her face lit up not with luxury, but with discovery, with understanding of the simple, vital things in life. It was humbling, and a part of him began to wish he could live in such a world even for a short time, as days passed. They learned to communicate silently at times, sharing glances, gestures, understanding each other's needs without words. It was a connection beyond language, beyond social status. They relied on each other completely, and slowly, a bond began to form. Quiet, but unbreakable. The man, once a billionaire who controlled so much, now depended on the girl's knowledge, her skill, and her care. And the girl, who had always relied on herself, now carried the responsibility for another life. The balance between them shifted daily, testing patience, courage, and trust. One evening, as they watched the sun set through the trees, he realized something he had never felt before, a sense of belonging, not to wealth or power, but to life itself. And in that moment, he understood that survival was not just about enduring the jungle. It was about connection, respect, and learning to see the world with new eyes. He turned to the girl, silently acknowledging that she had changed everything for him. And though neither spoke the words, both knew that something important, fragile and real, had begun in that wild, unyielding place. Days turned into weeks, and the man's strength gradually returned. His body, once fragile from the crash, now moved with more confidence, though he still relied heavily on the girl's guidance. She had become not just his caretaker, but also his teacher, showing him how to survive, how to read the land, how to respect the jungle and its rhythms. He watched her with admiration and humility, realizing more and more that he had never truly understood life until now. They discovered small tasks that became part of their daily routine. Gathering fruits, collecting clean water, and making sure their small shelter was secure became vital activities. Each day the man tried to contribute more, learning to use the skills she taught him. At first, he was clumsy and slow, but over time he improved, learning to move quietly through the jungle, to notice the subtle signs of wildlife, and to listen to the sounds of the forest. The girl observed him carefully, noting his determination and his willingness to learn. Unlike many who might have felt entitled or frustrated in his position, he accepted the situation. Humbled by the crash and the circumstances that forced him to rely on someone else, her respect for him grew slowly, a quiet acknowledgement of his ability to adapt and his growing humility. One morning, as the sun rose, the girl pointed to a distant area where smoke was rising. "There may be other people," she said. "We must be cautious." The man felt a pang of hope, the idea that someone could find them, but also a sense of apprehension. Rescue might mean returning to the life he had once known, a world that now seemed distant and less important. He glanced at the girl, seeing a determination in her eyes that reminded him that survival was not just about being found, but about learning to live fully in the present. They decided to investigate cautiously. Moving quietly, the man followed her lead, noting the way she read the land, the paths, the wind. Every step was deliberate, careful, mindful. The jungle, once a place of fear and unknown threats, had become a landscape of lessons and observation. He had grown to respect its power and its patience. As they neared the source of the smoke, they discovered a small village at the edge of the jungle. It was simple and humble, filled with people who lived close to the land, growing what they needed, hunting for their food, and living in harmony with the environment. The girl nodded, satisfied. They could rest here, find some supplies, and perhaps even communicate with others who might help. The villagers were wary at first, cautious about strangers, but the girl's presence reassured them. She had lived near this area and had earned the trust of the people over time. The man, dressed in tattered clothes and looking out of place among the villagers, remained quiet, observing and learning. The villagers offered him food and clean water, astonished by his appearance and the story of the plane crash he had survived. During this time, the man realized how much he had taken for granted. The life he once knew, full of luxuries and control, now felt superficial compared to the simplicity and honesty of the villagers' way of living. He began to see value in small things: a clean cup of water, a warm meal, a kind gesture from someone who expected nothing in return. The girl continued to guide him, teaching him not only survival skills, but also the ways of humility, patience, and gratitude. He noticed the changes in himself. He became quieter, more attentive, more willing to observe and reflect rather than act impulsively. The jungle had stripped him of his old arrogance and replaced it with a newfound respect for life, nature, and human connection. One day, while exploring with the girl, they They found a small river that led to a larger water source. The man was hesitant. At first, unsure of his swimming abilities and afraid of the unknown currents. The girl encouraged him, teaching him how to move with the flow, how to stay calm and confident. Slowly, he learned, feeling the thrill of mastering a skill he had never imagined himself performing. The experience bonded them further, as they laughed quietly at his initial clumsiness and celebrated his small victories together. Nightfall brought another challenge. The jungle was alive with sounds that could frighten even the most experienced traveler. The man realized that he was no longer afraid in the same way he had been immediately after the crash. He had learned to listen, to anticipate, and to move with awareness. The girl had taught him not only to survive, but also to understand the pulse of the jungle, to become part of it rather than its prisoner. As weeks turned into months, their routine became more refined. They built better shelters, found more reliable sources of food, and learned to avoid dangerous animals. The man began to appreciate the quiet moments watching the sunrise. Listening to the wind, sharing simple meals with the girl, the world he had once known, full of noise and urgency, now seemed distant and less important. What mattered was, here and now, the bond they shared and the life they were creating together in this wild, unpredictable environment. Their connection deepened beyond words. Each had come to rely on the other not just for survival, but for companionship, understanding, and trust. The man realized that wealth and status had never provided the kind of satisfaction he now felt. In being alive, in being useful, and in caring for someone who cared for him in return. The girl, who had always been self-reliant, began to appreciate the man's willingness to learn, to adapt, and to value her guidance. A mutual respect, quiet and profound, grew between them. One day, while gathering fruits near the river, the man spotted something unusual, a piece of debris from the plain, partially hidden by foliage. The sight triggered memories of the crash, the fear, the pain, and the helplessness he had felt. But this time he did not panic. He turned to the girl, sharing the discovery, and together they carefully examined it, understanding that it was a reminder of the life he had lost, but also a symbol of the resilience he had gained. They decided to mark the site and return to it occasionally, as a way to remember the journey they had endured and the lessons learned. It became a quiet ritual, a moment of reflection, an acknowledgement of their growth. The jungle, once a place of terror and isolation, had become a teacher, a guide, and a witness to their transformation. During these months, the man began to reflect on his past life in ways he had never allowed himself before. He remembered the endless meetings, the constant pressure, the focus on power and wealth above all else. None of it seemed meaningful now. He realized that his true lessons had come not from business or success, but from survival, humility, and the bond he shared with the girl. One evening, as the sky turned shades of orange and purple, they sat together near the river. The girl smiled, a quiet expression that spoke volumes of strength, resilience, and compassion. The man, feeling a deep sense of gratitude, realized that he had come to care for her deeply, not as a guide or protector, but as someone whose presence had fundamentally changed his life. He wanted to express his feelings, to acknowledge the profound impact she had had on him, but words felt insufficient. Instead, he simply sat in silence, sharing the moment, feeling the rhythm of the jungle, and understanding that some things were best felt rather than spoken. As they prepared for another night in the jungle, the man felt a new sense of purpose. He was no longer the same person who had boarded that plane weeks ago. He had learned to survive, to respect life, to value connection, and to appreciate the beauty in simplicity. And he knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them with the girl by his side, trusting in her guidance and the bond that had grown between them. The days in the jungle continued to blend together, yet each day felt unique. The man and the girl had settled into a rhythm that balanced survival with quiet exploration. The man had grown stronger, more agile, and far more aware of his surroundings. His body, once weak and dependent, now moved with intention and skill. He still relied on the girl for guidance, but his confidence had begun to grow, slowly taking root in his mind and body. Each morning, they would rise with the sun. Moving through the dense foliage with practiced ease, the girl taught him more about the jungle than he ever thought he could learn: how to identify edible plants, which insects to avoid, how to predict rain from subtle shifts in the wind, and even how to track animals without startling them. Every lesson was a test, but the man approached each one with patience, determination, and a humility that had been foreign to him just weeks before. One afternoon, while they explored a new section of the jungle, they came upon a wide clearing. It was a strange mix of wild growth and small signs of human activity footprints. A broken tool and a few scraps of fabric caught in the bushes. The girl frowned, recognizing the area as one used by occasional travelers or hunters, though infrequently. She cautioned him to stay alert, reminding him that not all people were kind. The jungle could be unpredictable. Despite the caution, the man was fascinated. He had always lived in controlled environments, with clear rules and predictable outcomes. Here, everything was alive, uncertain, and yet deeply connected. He began to understand that survival was not just about strength or knowledge, it was about intuition, observation, and respect for the world around you. As they continued their journey, he noticed small changes in himself. He was no longer focused on money or power. He was attentive, listening to the sounds of the jungle, observing patterns, noticing details he would have overlooked in his old life. He began to see beauty in simplicity, the way sunlight filtered through leaves, the delicate patterns of insects on a leaf, the quiet strength of the girl who had become his guide and companion. One evening, as they sat by the river, the girl caught a fish using a simple handmade trap. The man watched in awe, impressed by her patience and skill. She handed him a small spear, teaching him how to hold it, how to aim, and how to move silently. His first attempts were clumsy, but with her encouragement, he eventually managed to catch a small fish. The sense of accomplishment was overwhelming. It was a feeling he had never experienced in his life of luxurious, simple, hard-earned victory that connected him to the land. And to the girl beside him, their nights were filled with quiet conversation and reflection. The man shared fragments of his past life, the constant pressure, the endless meetings, the loneliness despite wealth and power. The girl listened without judgment, sharing only small details about her own life, careful to keep her privacy but offering enough to build trust. These conversations became a bridge between their worlds, fostering understanding, respect, and a growing emotional connection. One day, while exploring a dense part of the jungle, they came across an old, overgrown path leading to a riverbank. The water was deeper here and the current strong. The girl warned him to stay close, demonstrating how to move carefully along the slippery rocks. The man struggled at first, fearing the danger, but he followed her instructions, learning to trust not only her knowledge, but also his own instincts. They spent hours navigating the riverbank, collecting fruits and small plants, and observing the wildlife. Every step, every choice, required focus, and the man felt alive in a way he never had in the sterile, controlled environments of his old life. As the days passed, he began to notice something unexpected: emotions he had long ignored or suppressed. He found himself caring deeply for the girl, not just for her guidance, but for her presence, her courage, her quiet strength. He realized that he had grown to trust her implicitly, to value her opinion, and to feel a sense of protection and admiration for her. This was new territory, uncharted and fragile, yet profoundly real. The girl, in turn, noticed changes in him. He was more patient, more attentive, more willing to listen. He no longer acted impulsively or demanded control. She observed his growing confidence and survival skills and his willingness to adapt. Slowly, she began to see him not just as someone to guide, but as a partner in this shared experience. There was a mutual respect, a subtle understanding, and a connection that neither had fully acknowledged but both felt deeply. One afternoon, they stumbled upon a small cave hidden behind thick vines. Inside, the air was cool and dry, and the space offered a perfect spot to rest and store some supplies. The girl carefully inspected the cave for safety, checking for animals and potential hazards. Once satisfied, she guided him in arranging a comfortable area using leaves and soft moss. The man, now strong enough, helped in lifting and organizing, feeling a sense of pride in contributing. It was a small but meaningful task, reinforcing the sense of partnership they had developed. As night fell, the sounds of the jungle shifted. The man, lying beside the girl in the makeshift shelter, reflected on how much had changed. He had entered this wilderness alone, scared, weak, and dependent. Now he was stronger, more aware, and deeply connected to another human being in a way he had never experienced. The jungle had stripped him of his former identity and given him something far more valuable: understanding, humility, and companionship. They spent nights sharing stories of their lives, fears, dreams, and hopes. The man spoke of missed opportunities, regrets, and the emptiness he had felt despite his wealth. The girl shared lessons learned from surviving in a harsh world, her strategies for resilience, and the quiet joy she found in simple achievements. Through these conversations, they grew closer, their bond deepening into something neither fully understood but both cherished. One morning, the man woke early and observed the girl gathering water and preparing for the day. He felt a strong urge to do more, to contribute more meaningfully. He began helping with tasks, not out of obligation, but out of a desire to be useful and to support her. This small shift marked a significant change in their relationship. He was no longer just a dependent survivor. He was an active participant in their shared life, learning, adapting, and growing alongside her. The jungle, once a place of fear and uncertainty, had become a landscape of opportunity and discovery. The man and the girl explored further each day, learning more about the plants, animals, and terrain. They encountered challenges: sudden storms, difficult terrain, and occasional wild animals, but they faced them together, relying on their growing trust and teamwork. Through these experiences, the man realized that survival was more than just staying alive. It was about learning to connect with the world, to respect its rhythms, to understand and value another human being. The girl had become not only his guide, but also his anchor, helping him navigate a world far removed from the one he had known. Evenings became times of reflection and quiet joy. They would sit together near the river, watching the sunset, sharing small meals, talking about the day's discoveries. The man felt a sense of peace he had never experienced before. The girl, too, began to appreciate the depth of his presence, his willingness to learn, and the quiet kindness he displayed in ways that had nothing to do with wealth or status. One day, while exploring a high ridge overlooking the jungle, they discovered a breathtaking view of the vast green expanse. The man was struck by the beauty and immensity of it all. He realized that his old life, filled with concrete and steel, could never have offered such a perspective. The girl stood beside him, calm and assured, sharing the moment without words. Together, they felt a sense of belonging, not to the world they had known, but to the life they had built in the jungle. The connection between them grew stronger with each passing day. Trust, respect, and admiration intertwined with moments of shared joy, laughter, and quiet understanding. They had become partners in the truest sense, facing challenges, celebrating victories, and learning from mistakes together. As night fell, they settled near the river, the jungle alive with the sounds of nocturnal life. The man felt a profound sense of gratitude and wonder. He had come to the jungle alone, broken and fearful, but now he was whole in ways he had never imagined. He looked at the girl, knowing that their journey was far from over, but confident that together they could face whatever lay ahead. The bond they shared, forged through adversity and nurtured by trust and care, had become a source of strength, hope, and something far deeper than either had anticipated. Months had passed since the crash, and the man had transformed completely. The jungle had stripped away his former identity and replaced it with something stronger, quieter, and wiser. He moved with confidence and skill, though he still relied on the girl's guidance for the most difficult paths. Together, they had survived storms, dangerous animals, and harsh terrain. Each challenge had strengthened their bond, creating a partnership built on trust, respect, and shared experience. One morning, as the sun rose over the dense canopy, the girl pointed to a distant ridge. Beyond that hill is a river that leads to the main village, she said. If we follow it, we may find people who can help us get back to civilization. The man felt a mixture of hope and hesitation. The thought of returning to the world he had once known brought both comfort and fear. His old life, with its wealth and control, seemed distant and superficial. Here in the jungle he had discovered resilience, humility, and the quiet joy of being truly alive. They packed their supplies carefully and began the journey toward the ridge. The terrain was challenging, steep, and covered in thick undergrowth, but they moved steadily, side by side. The man relied on the skills he had learned over the past months: how to read the landscape, how to anticipate dangers, and how to conserve energy. The girl led the way, confident and watchful, teaching him new things even as they traveled along the path. They encountered signs of wildlife tracks, nests, and distant calls of animals. The man had grown to respect the jungle's life, understanding that each creature had its place and purpose. He no longer saw them as threats, but as part of the intricate balance he had come to appreciate as they reached the river. The water sparkled in the sunlight. The girl taught him how to navigate the currents, pointing out safe spots to cross and areas to avoid. Together, they waded through, supporting each other when the current grew strong. The man felt a deep sense of accomplishment and connection. Knowing that he had learned to face challenges he would never have imagined surviving, reaching the main village. They were greeted by cautious but curious villagers. The girl's presence reassured them, and they offered food, clean water, and a place to rest. The man, now dressed in clothes patched and cleaned by the villagers, felt a mixture of gratitude and humility. The village was simple, yet filled with life, cooperation, and warmth. It was a stark contrast to the cold, controlled environment he had once inhabited. Over the following days, they recovered and prepared for the journey back to the nearest city. The man's body had regained strength, but his mind had changed even more profoundly. He no longer measured success by money or power. He valued life, relationships, and the lessons learned from struggle. The girl, who had always been resilient, had guided him not only through survival, but also through personal transformation. One evening, as they sat by the riverbank, the man spoke quietly. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. "You've saved my life, taught me more than anyone ever could, and changed me." The girl smiled, her expression calm yet warm. "You did the hard part yourself," she said. "You survived. You learned. You listened. I only showed the way." He looked at her, feeling a surge of emotions he had never known before: gratitude, admiration, and something deeper, an affection that had grown quietly over the months. The connection between them had become undeniable, a bond forged in hardship and strengthened by mutual respect as they prepared to leave the jungle. The man realized that returning to his old life would not be the same. He had changed in ways that money and comfort could never replicate. He no longer sought control over others, but sought understanding, empathy, and connection. The girl had opened his eyes to a world beyond wealth, a world where survival, courage, and kindness were the true measures of strength. Their journey out of the jungle was challenging but manageable. The man had learned to navigate the terrain, to read the environment, and to rely on his instincts. The girl, ever watchful, guided him with confidence, teaching him new nuances even as they moved forward. Each day reinforced the lessons of patience, observation, and resilience. Reaching the edge of the forest, they looked back one last time. The jungle had been harsh, unforgiving, and at times terrifying, but it had also been a place of growth, transformation, and profound connection. The man felt a deep sense of gratitude for the experiences and for the girl, who had walked beside him through it all. Returning to civilization was both exhilarating and strange. The sounds, the crowds, the movement of the city felt overwhelming at first, yet the man carried the lessons of the jungle within him. He moved with awareness, appreciated simplicity, and valued human connection above all else. The girl remained by his side, her presence a steady reminder of strength, courage, and resilience. He began to rebuild his life, not as the man who had once been defined by wealth and power, But as someone who had seen the fragility and beauty of life, he invested in causes that mattered, helped communities, and lived with a sense of purpose that had been absent before. He often reflected on the girl's guidance, her patience, and her unwavering strength. She had not only saved his life, but had reshaped it completely. The bond between them deepened. They shared stories of the jungle, the survival, the moments of fear and triumph, and the quiet joy of companionship. Each story strengthened their connection, reminding them of the journey they had endured together. Their respect and admiration for each other grew into something more profound, love built on trust. Shared experience and the understanding that life's true value is measured in resilience, courage, and the bonds we form. In time, the man came to appreciate the simplicity of life alongside the girl. They built a home that honored both his past and the lessons learned in the jungle, a place of warmth, simplicity, and purpose. He often thought about the plane crash, once a symbol of fear and loss. Now, a turning point that had brought him to a life richer in ways he had never imagined. Their story, though born in tragedy, became one of survival, transformation, and love. They had faced the unimaginable, learned from it, and emerged not just alive, but profoundly changed. The man, once defined by power and wealth, had discovered the true meaning of strength, humility, and human connection. The girl, who had always known the value of resilience and courage, had helped him see the world through new eyes and, in doing so, had shared her life, her heart, and her unwavering spirit together. They moved forward, carrying the lessons of the jungle, the memory of the struggle, and the bond that had grown from adversity. Their love, forged in the heart of the wild, became a testament to the power of trust, courage, and the human spirit. And as they faced the future, they did so not with fear or control, but with understanding, compassion, and the knowledge that life and all its challenges could be beautiful when shared with someone who truly cares. Life after the jungle brought both comfort and new challenges for the man and the girl. Civilization was bright, noisy, and full of people who moved quickly without noticing the details that had become so important to them in the jungle. The man, once consumed by wealth and power, found himself adjusting to a world that now seemed superficial in comparison to the raw reality of survival he had endured. The girl adapted as well, though with different concerns. She had spent her life relying on instincts and simplicity, navigating the jungle with skill and resilience. The city, with its rules, buildings, and constant movement, was overwhelming at first. She noticed things people often ignored: patterns and behavior. Sounds, smells, and moved cautiously, yet her confidence never wavered. She had learned to trust herself, and that confidence helped the man navigate the social and practical challenges of returning to a more structured life. The man quickly realized that although he had survived the jungle, he still carried habits and attitudes from his past life. His mind often raced with tasks, plans, and worries. The girl reminded him, gently but firmly, that not everything required control, that some things were best approached with patience and presence. Her words were not just advice, but lessons shaped by months of survival and keen observation. Together, they began to rebuild a life that blended both worlds. The man used his resources to create a home that reflected simplicity and comfort, still respecting the lessons of humility and patience he had learned. He invested in projects that helped communities, supported environmental efforts, and prioritized meaningful human connections. Each step was guided by the perspective he had gained from the jungle and the girl's steady influence. Despite the comforts of civilization, they continued to explore nature. Weekends were spent hiking, camping, and observing wildlife. These trips were not just recreation, but reminders of what they had endured and the skills they had honed. They tested themselves in small ways, challenging each other to navigate rivers, climb hills, and endure minor hardships. Each experience reinforced their trust, teamwork, and respect for one another. The man also began to share his story selectively, telling only those who were genuinely interested in the lessons rather than the wealth he once had. He spoke about humility, resilience, and the importance of adapting to circumstances beyond one's control. The girl remained mostly quiet, letting her actions and skills speak for themselves. People noticed her strength, calm, demeanor, and intelligence, often assuming she had come from a background of experience far beyond her years. One evening, as they sat on the balcony of their home overlooking the city lights, the man spoke softly. "I sometimes think about the jungle," he said, "about how fragile everything seemed and how much I took for granted. I wonder if I could have survived without you." The girl smiled, her eyes reflecting the calm confidence she had always carried. "You could have," she replied, "but you would not have learned what you needed to learn. Survival isn't just about living. It's about understanding life, yourself, and those around you." He nodded, reflecting on her words. He had learned humility, patience, and the value of trust. He had experienced fear, pain, and uncertainty, but he had also experienced growth, connection, and understanding. The girl had been his guide, his teacher, and eventually his partner in a way that transcended the physical survival of the jungle, as weeks turned into months. They became more integrated into society while still holding on to the lessons of their time in the wild. The man had shifted from being a figure defined by wealth and control to someone recognized for compassion, understanding, and action. The girl, who had once relied solely on her instincts for survival, had learned to navigate the complexities of human society without losing her strength, independence, or a sense of purpose. They faced small challenges along the way, adapting to modern technology, dealing with people who misunderstood their bond, and balancing work with personal growth. But each challenge was met with patience, communication, and the understanding that their partnership was built on trust and shared experience. The man began mentoring others, teaching not only business strategies but also life lessons about humility, resilience, and the value of relationships. The girl joined him in some initiatives, bringing a perspective grounded in practicality, observation, and respect for nature. Their combined skills created a dynamic partnership that inspired those around them. At home, they continued to honor their past experiences. They displayed small artifacts from the jungle rocks, handmade tools, sketches of the terrain, reminders of what they had survived and what they had learned. These objects were not trophies, but symbols of growth, endurance, and the bond they shared. One day, they decided to revisit the village that had helped them before reaching the city. The villagers welcomed them warmly, amazed by the man's transformation and impressed by the girl's confidence and poise. They shared stories of survival, growth, and change, inspiring the villagers and strengthening the bond between past and present. It was a moment of reflection, gratitude, and recognition of how far they had come. Their relationship deepened with time. The man no longer saw the girl merely as a guide or a savior. She had become an equal partner, someone whose insight, courage, and intelligence were invaluable. She, in turn, recognized his transformation, the humility, patience, and understanding he now carried. Love between them grew quietly, steadily. Grounded in shared experiences and mutual respect, rather than fleeting emotions or superficial attraction, they began to plan long-term projects together, environmental efforts, educational programs for youth, and initiatives to support remote communities. Their time in the jungle had taught them the importance of resilience, community, and sustainability. They wanted to bring these lessons to the broader world, using their experiences to guide action and inspire change, even as life became more structured. They maintained moments of spontaneity and adventure. They would travel to remote locations, test their survival skills, and challenge themselves in ways that reminded them of the jungle. These moments reinforced their bond, kept their skills sharp, and reminded them that life, even in comfort, is meant to be lived fully. The man often reflected on his transformation. He had entered the jungle as someone defined by wealth, control, and societal expectations. He had emerged not just alive, but profoundly changed, humble, patient, resilient, and deeply connected to another human being who had guided him through the most difficult time of his life. The girl had helped him discover not only survival skills, but also empathy, understanding, and love. The girl, too, reflected on their journey. She had grown accustomed to relying on herself, yet the partnership with the man had taught her trust, collaboration, and the value of shared experiences. She had discovered strength in connection, a sense of purpose beyond personal survival, and the joy of guiding and nurturing someone who had become more than just a companion. Together, they navigated the complexities of life with a newfound perspective. They balanced modernity with simplicity, ambition with patience, and personal growth with shared purpose. Their love and partnership, forged in the wild, became the foundation for a life rich with meaning, resilience, and understanding. In the end, the man realized that the greatest lessons had not come from business deals or wealth, but from surviving, learning, and growing with someone who challenged, guided, and inspired him. The girl understood that true strength included connection, patience, and the willingness to share one's knowledge and heart. Together, they had created a life that honored the past, embraced the present, and looked forward to the future with hope, courage, and love.